And that goes for not just sales, but that goes for every relationship. I mean, if you're dialed in and you're having the kind of communication where you're talking about small things, then big things happen. Because I firmly believe people drastically overestimate what they can accomplish in a year, but they wildly underestimate what they can do in a decade. And having been married for 20 years and having 7 children, I've seen that play out over the last 2 decades. Is that I'm always amazed at what we've accomplished in the last 10 years when you sit down and look at it.
Welcome back to another installment of the Next Gen Case Study Series. On today's episode, I have with me Dylan Ferguson, who is an investor and the Senior Director of Sales at Fullcast, where he leads the company's efforts in helping RevOps teams optimize go-to-market strategies. Fullcast specializes in revenue operations automation, providing solutions for territory alignment, capacity planning, and lead routing. With a background in sales leadership from companies like Seagate, Salesforce, and Workday, Dylan brings a significant expertise in driving sales performance and enhancing operational efficiency, which is why we're excited to have him on the show. Dylan, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, the pleasure's all mine. I'm really excited to get into some of the work that you're doing right now. Before we get too far ahead of ourselves, Dylan, let's start with maybe a couple of minutes on who you are, where you came from, and how you found yourself working with Fullcast.
Yeah. I grew up in Idaho, moved to Salt Lake City, and went to the University of Utah. Married with 7 children, just hit 20 years on the marriage, and
Congratulations.
yeah, having the best life ever. It's awesome.
Yeah, that's really exciting, man. I'm curious to learn how some of these early experiences with Seagate, Salesforce, Workday, all those other things have kind of helped shape your trajectory in your career path. Maybe let's start with a little bit of that. What were some of the insights that you've kind of picked up along the way?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think I had a natural propensity for sales just as a kid. I came from a background of not really having a lot of, financial resources, so I had to earn my own stuff. So from 8 years old on, I, knocked on doors and mowed lawns. In the wintertime, I knocked on doors, shoveled sidewalks. I sold magazine, newspaper subscriptions, did really well on those kinds of things. And then as I got older, I thought, I want to go to law school. So I applied to law school, got into a couple, and then ultimately decided that wasn't for me. And so I had no plan at that point. And I was like, well, I think I've got a propensity for sales. Let me go give that a shot. So I got a job with a company called eVault, which at the time was a data backup and disaster recovery arm of Seagate. And it was the first time SaaS backup and recovery was being sold. I think we were selling data backup for $100 a gigabyte a month. And so I learned, it was kind of like a startup sort of company. It was maybe 300 people, as an inside sales job, on the phones. We even have tools. So we were using like the free reference USA, which is basically like the online phone book.
Hmm.
We could only copy 25 lines at a time, and we had to build these Excel sheets to try to do 100 calls a day. And but while I was there, I had some great mentors. I learned a lot about selling. I learned a lot about um, driving value from some key leaders. And as a result, I moved up 5 times in 5 years there, ultimately running not just inside sales, but I ran our outside and in sales team for the East Coast. So I had New York, Chicago, and then I had about 17 people in Salt Lake City on the inside team. And then I flipped with a colleague and I ended up running the West, and he ran the East. So we kind of had a duality there. But while I was doing that, we brought Salesforce in-house, got off of an old Sales Logic CRM for Salesforce, and I saw how revolutionary it was. And I had a leader that I really admired in New York, a guy named Terry Dorman, and he left and went to Salesforce. And I sent him a note and I said, "Hey, I would love to work for Salesforce. Anything open out in this area?" So he got a hold of a hiring manager, and they were in the time managing a person out. And they said, "It's going to take some time, but if you're patient, let's see if we can make something work." So it took me 9 months. I interviewed with 5 people over a VP or above at Salesforce. At that time, I was employee 7,500. They were hiring more. It was harder to get hired by Salesforce than to get into Harvard. So they took less than 6% of their applicants. It took me 9 months to get the job. And I was the youngest enterprise AE they'd ever hired in their history. So I was only 30 years old. And I went to President's Club my first year. Did really well, really enjoyed what they were doing. They were revolutionizing the way people, create relationships with their customers, manage the customers all the way through the life cycle, not just in the selling, but in the service side of it, on the marketing side of it, and on the platform and development side of it, and got to work with some of the biggest brands in the world, learned a ton about the large enterprise. But like all companies, they grow fast, the territory shrink, the quotas get bigger. My family got bigger, and I figured this really wasn't the right place for me long term. So I had some friends that had left and gone to Workday in Salt Lake City. At the time, the second largest office for Workday was in Utah.
Mm.
And so I went to work for them. But I'm a person that likes to have his hair on fire. I like to do, a lot of things. And you're selling to HR and finance, probably the most risk averse people on the planet. And you might do one or two deals a year at the time. And that really wasn't my style. I wanted a little bit more. I'm more of a grinder than a whale hunter, I would say. And so I left and went to go work for a Salesforce implementation partner called Simplus. And I was employee 30. We were probably maybe $1 million in revenue at the time I joined. I got a little piece of the company, and we grew it from 30 people to 7,000 people. And we sold the company to Infosys, the largest Indian-based company in the United States. At the time, then we took the same team that kind of grew and built Simplus. We took our money and we invested in a company called Fullcast, which is where I am now. So I'm an investor and an active go-to-market specialist there, and helping us build our clientele and our book of business. So that's the quick run through.
Some incredible accomplishments along the way, notably going from 30 to 7,000. That's an incredible feat. I can't even imagine what would have gone into that level of growth over that span of time. It must have been quite a journey.
Yeah.
I
To give you an idea, I averaged 50 deals a year for 7 years is what I closed. So that's 350 account or deals closed one in a 7-year period. So I did 11% of the all-time revenue. But what was amazing about working there is I met some of the most amazing people. Everyone was an A player. It was such a team environment, and it was run by one of the best management teams I've ever seen. And I've worked for some big companies, and they had great management teams. But I firmly believe, I'll die on this hill, the management team I work with is the best I've ever seen.
What made them so good?
They cared about the people, and because they realized the business was the people.
Oh,
Um, so I've got 8 years with these people, and they convinced me to go from a 7-figure job down to a startup. I mean, you imagine what it would take to get someone to buy into that when they have 7 children.
right.
And it's because they're as committed and focused and driving success as I am. And that's a rare thing for me that I've found. I tend to obsess over what I'm doing. I'm 100% in when I do something. I don't have a middle speed. I'm either 0 or 100%. And they're all like that. But while they're doing it, they care about you as a person. The first interview I had with the CEO of Simplus, his name's Ryan Westwood. We spent 2 hours talking when he had me come in. He never once asked me a business question. He asked me where I came from. He asked me about my family. He asked me about school, what had been challenges in my life. And by the time we were done, we both knew each other so well, because I had no intention of taking the job. I was going to go work for another blue chip. And by the time I was done, he said, well, I think we were prepared to offer you a job. And I was like, we didn't even talk about business. Why would you do that? And he says, I know everything I need to know about you and your DNA to know that you're the right fit for our company.
Wow.
So that to me was just an eye opener to see that he wasn't hiring for a job. He was hiring for the person. He was looking for the right person that had the right kind of grit and resiliency to go chase down a big business. And it's exactly what we did together. So fun.
Yeah, man, that's incredible to find the people who appreciate the humanity that's behind the machine, because that's one thing that gets lost in these extraordinarily large teams is that you just
Yes.
become a cog in the wheel, right?
That's everything. I mean, people read all these business books. I've stopped reading them and I started reading books about people because that's who run businesses. I read notable books about notable people because I want to understand, more importantly than what they accomplished, what were their relationships like? I asked myself, how well did they get along with their mother and their father and their children? What did they sacrifice in those relationships for the accolades they achieved in life? And I've learned a lot about it. And what it really boiled down to is that most people are living someone else's dream because they feel like they need to please other people.
Mm.
And that's really helped me as a business person to recognize that my goal is to help the people around me get better and get where they're trying to go. And if I'm good at that and if I'm good at that with my clients, helping them achieve what they're trying to get to, then I'm going to do well. But it really doesn't matter. The 5 steps to success stuff to me is less important than are you happy and are you kind?
Hmm. Well, there's this big push, and I'm sure it has always existed for, systemization and optimization of processes and standardization of practices, and this has to be done this way and that way and whatever else. But the one thing I picked up on you very early was that the human element is really important to you, and
Mm.
this idea of you wanting to kind of, and I don't know if this is the right way to put it, so correct me as I'm kind of muscling through it, but to be in a constant state of chaos where there is unpredictability, challenges, puzzles, things to solve, seems so interesting to you. And I know a lot of people, when asked about sales, will give you a very blunt answer in that they hate it, they don't want to do it, they don't want to participate in it, they don't like people who do it. It's a very stigmatized title. And for you to have this natural proclivity to want to build relationships, connect with people, I think perhaps might have led to your success as a salesperson. But I'd love to get from your side the perspective of, what has kind of contributed to that. What have you found that has helped you like maintain that trajectory without getting polluted by all of that inbound ideologies that things must be this way?
Yeah, yeah, good question. I think it comes down to a couple of things. First, in business, you're taught you care about you got to focus on people, process, and technology. But I see a lot of companies tend to be more focused on technology and process than they really are people.
Mm,
But what's interesting is that the people are the ones that create the culture, and the culture eats the strategy every time. So even if your process and your technology strategy are in play, if you don't have the people bought into those things, their culture will eat your strategy every single time. So for me, uh, I've learned that you got to create a culture of success by understanding that there's 3 core people at every. There's dreamers, there's doers, and there's drivers. And every once in a while, you're lucky enough to find someone that's all three, like our CEO and our CMO and our chief marketing officer or our chief commercial officer. They're all three. They're both dreamers. They have great vision. They have great drive, and they also do. They actually execute. They don't just point to people and say, "Why isn't this done?" But they're in the trench digging with you. And so that's a big component. And so I've learned that the happiest people I've ever met are doing something for somebody else, and the most miserable people I've ever met are doing things for themselves.
mm,
I think that's why sales gets such a negative rap, is because there's a lot of self-interested people in that space. But what I've come to find out is when I take myself out of it and I'm just trying to figure out what success means for the customer or the prospect, and I do everything in my power to achieve that success for them, that's really how and where the relationships come from. Because relationships are easy until you encounter difficulty. And most people do not know how to take difficulty and turn it into an actual partnership. But that's when partnership really happens, is when the difficulty comes. So it's one of the first things I say when I meet a prospect is like, you're talking to me because I can do something that's really hard for you. Otherwise, you'd be doing it yourself. So that means we're going to get to a place where we're going to do something that's significantly difficult, and you may not like me or as my team or someone for a moment. And at that place, we determine what kind of partnership we have. If you can trust me by being transparent and saying, this, and this is not working for me, let's work through it. And you'll recognize that we're not just trying to cover our basis, or we're not trying to protect ourselves, but we're here to actually be humble, have some humility, and execute against it. And if change or adjustments required, that we're actually willing to do that.
mm.
That's when you know if you've got someone you actually want to work with and you're going to enjoy, you can trust that when you've bet your badge on the technology, that they're going to have your back and they're going to care as much about your success as you do. So that's where I've made my living. That's where I've made my success, is by caring more about their success, because if they're successful, then I am as well. But
Mm.
when you make it about yourself, I mean, that relationship dies pretty quick. You're going to be one and done in a selling, because who knows when you'll get a chance to work with them again. They might leave it and go to another company, and they're going to remember that experience with you. They're going to call up and say, I know I may be aligned to a different rep, but I want to work with Dylan. And that's happened a number of occasions.
Yeah, there's this notion that I'm getting from this where there's them and then there's us and then there's the problem. And all three are separate entities. And when the problem becomes them or the problem becomes us, that's where the disconnect happens, and it kind of puts a wrench in the machine, and now nobody can make any kind of progress. And what I'm sensing is that your belief is that this comes from maybe the ego getting involved in the decision making or the efforts that are being put forward. Am I off on the mark there?
No, nailed it. It's exactly it. I mean, once I becomes more important than we, then it doesn't matter what happens after that. But if you can tell someone, empower them, say, I want to know about things when they're little. You might feel like it's nitpicky, but if you tell me when things are little, I never have to worry about things when they're big
Hmm.
because I'll address them when they're little. But that means you have to stay engaged. You can't be so busy that you can't be involved and engaged with what they're doing, that you respond quickly, that you're um, prioritizing their needs when they're small, and then they won't worry about whether you got them when there's something big, if there ever is anything big.
So
That
what?
goes for not just sales, but that goes for every relationship. I mean, if you're dialed in and you're having the kind of communication where you're talking about small things, then big things happen. Because I firmly believe people drastically overestimate what they can accomplish in a year, but they wildly underestimate what they can do in a decade. And
Hmm.
having been married for 20 years and having 7 children, I've seen that play out over the last 2 decades. Is that I'm always amazed at what we've accomplished in the last 10 years when you sit down and look at it.
You know, I really wanted to dig in a little bit more to that point that you made too about when it's hard. Because every relationship that you ever have, whether it's a professional one or a personal one, will at some point get to a hard point where it's
Yeah,
difficult and there's conflict and that resolution is necessary. And I get that um, it's difficult, but how somebody deals with conflict is a reflection of how your relationship will play out. And so if something bad comes up and everybody's pointing fingers at everybody, that's not productive. Nobody's getting anywhere. In fact, the responsibility or the blame is not so much important as it is the correction, the actions that need to be taken to fix this, and then, getting to a place where there is resolve. So for you, what does that look like in a state of conflict where you navigate that in a way that's healthy for the partnership?
great question. I'll start by asking everyone listening to think about their most important or most valuable relationships in their life, whether it's at work or it's at home, and ask yourself, what difficult things have I gone through with those people? And what about that experience made me feel closer and more bonded to them? Were they compassionate when they should have been critical, and that made you endeared to them? Were they honest with you when no one else was willing to be?
Mm,
Did they call you out on behavior that wasn't acceptable, and because of that you grew and you learned that you could grow towards something better than you had in your life? The same thing is how I look at it in business. Is when your customer tells you something, number one, are you listening enough to say, where is my responsibility in this? And beyond that, even if it's not my responsibility, where's the kernel of truth? People are tending to listen to talk, I find quite
mm,
often, as opposed to listen to understand. And also, they want to protect their ego. They typically want to clarify what happened or why it happened, as opposed to saying, you know what, I can see in this moment, I I could have done this instead of this, and I'll own that.
mm,
That one little phrase right there tells the person on the phone that, number one, they're worth growing for. Number two, you're humble enough to take counsel and apply it and get better, and that you're going to work towards becoming better. And I don't know about you, but do you want to partner with people that aren't going to grow? I
right.
don't.
Yeah.
And so if I'm trying to create a relationship where I'm providing a service or some sort of goods to somebody, I want them to know the person they're working with is always focused on growth,
Hmm.
whether it's the company, shareholder value, the product, or my own personal skill set. And people, when they understand that that exists and they have permission to be genuine,
Hmm.
they'll relax. They'll actually tell you what's really going on. You don't have to play as many political games because you're going to prove to them in your own behavior, in your own actions, that you're there for a different reason than most people. I call them empty suits. There's a lot of empty suits in the world. Um, when they understand that you're a person treating them like a person,
Hmm.
it gives you the permission as a salesperson to be vulnerable and say, I have feelings, even though I've tried to burn them off many times in my career. And I have a family and I have needs and I have things I'm trying to accomplish. But I also recognize that so do you. As soon as a salesperson turns it about them right out of the gate, it's over.
Right.
But if you can prove to them that you're really there to provide genuine value, that you have, you know, thought it through, built it together, and actually can put it on paper and show them something of worth and of value, then every single time they talk with me, I'm going to drive some additional value forward. I've done some research. I've reviewed what their concerns are. I brought something to their table they didn't ask for, but was there.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's like any relationship where if you're paying close enough attention, you're always driving and adding value. They're always going to take your call, especially when it's inconvenient, like end of quarter or end of month when they're busy.
Right. But that's seemingly when it matters most too, right?
Yeah, I mean, you have there's the idea that trust is earned or trust is given. I'm a firm believer, and I give trust, but because uh, one of the best things in the world you can give is that. And
Mm.
if you're willing to give it, uh, then other people are willing to receive it. Very often, they'll reciprocate. But you have to be the first truster. Like I saw a Harvard research paper. It says what makes popular kids popular and other kids not popular. And what they found was it really didn't have a lot to do with socioeconomic development. It had everything to do with who was a first liker.
Mm.
The people that liked other people first, gave comments. I like your shirt. I like your bag. I like you. Hey, why don't you come to this? They invite, they include. Those people are the most popular people because people like feeling valued and they like having connection and like being seen. And the same goes in with relationships is if you're looking for things to be worried about or if fear is driving everything, you're always going to remain in a state of fear. But if you're looking for reasons to like people, if you're looking for reasons to find the best in people that you're working with, even when you could be finding fault, it's not to say you're putting your head in your sand, but it's saying you're leading with the value you see and the
Mm.
value you notice. Then they start to see the value you're bringing. And then the little things, the challenge part of it, the negatives don't feel as big or as hard because you already feel valued. You already feel respected and seen. I hope that makes sense.
No, absolutely. And to further the point, on one side there is always good, and on the other side there's always bad. And really what uh where you put your attention is what becomes the leader. So if all you do is go around the world and criticize and judge and look for things that are bad or wrong or aren't suitable or don't meet your expectations,
Yep.
you will see more and more and more of that. But if you are out in the world and observing the beauty in people, how good somebody is, oh, I like your dress, or oh, I like the way that you, phrased that thing that you said to me, or whatever it is. Like if you're looking for good, you're going to find that just as easily as you're finding the bad. And so, I think the onus does fall back on you. But now, how much of this, and I'm really curious to get your perspective, Dylan, on when it comes to that state of conflict. Let's say I'll give you a real world example. I go out and I spend my time building out a automation strategy for a business. I present it, they like it, we implement it. But somewhere in that implementation, because of how complex it was, let's say I forgot to flip a switch, and so somebody doesn't have access to the thing that they need. And so I get that call a week later, and the person's upset. Hey, this thing's broken. It's not working right. I can't see this thing that I thought I was supposed to see. And it's right here in this moment. I want you to kind of help me analyze a little bit. In that moment, there's a couple of reactions that I can have. And I'll use the first one is, what do you think? I'm stupid? You think I'm not good enough to be able to create the thing that does the thing that you're asking me to do? Right? And it's a very defensive stance versus, hey, you have a problem, the person I'm aiming at serving, and I identify that it is this. So let me go and take a look at what I can do to fix that problem and proactively make sure that it doesn't happen again. Although, we make mistakes, I want to be upfront and honest and say that I acknowledge my mistake. I'm going to go fix it, and hopefully you'll stay with me and continue to do business with me. So there's the two different, right, the good and the bad frame there. What's your take on that?
Well, the first thing is if they're calling you to tell me something like that, clearly to them and in their moment, they're having a challenge that they don't understand. So first I'd say, hey, thank you for telling me.
Mm-hmm.
I'll recognize that. I appreciate it. Thank you for bringing this to me. Number two, let me ask you a few questions. I want to make sure that I really understand what it is they're saying their problem is. Sometimes we hear the first thing and we assume, and then we go to bit and we fix something that actually wasn't the problem.
Right.
So I want to make sure I truly understand what the problem is there. And once I'm very clear, and I'll do some restatings and say, hey, so what I hear is this is the challenge. You can't do this. Is there anything else? Is anyone else being affected that I'm not aware of? Because I don't want to fix their problem. I want to fix the problem.
Mm,
And if they're having a problem, is anyone else reporting this challenge? Because I want to understand if it's isolated or if it's larger. Once I have that, and I say, all right, clearly there's some things that we can do. There's probably something we messed up on. That out is the one I can, and then I'll tell them I'm not going to stop working on this until it's resolved, and I'll be giving you updates depending on how severe it is. I'll let them know when and how often to expect updates, and make sure that's acceptable to them. That way they understand. I understand the problem. I understand that, and they know it matters to me. And number two, that I'm proactively going to be reaching out to them to update them on the system. So when they go back and tell their business, hey, this is what's going on, they're going to be updating us on the hour until it's completed, and they're going to give us a history or a report on exactly what happened and where it broke down, and then what they're going to do about the remedy. So, for example, if someone was down and it cost them money and time, I want to understand what that impact looks like. Is there a situation where either we need to do some sort of refund, whatever to make that right? That's something I'm going to care about. So I'm not going to wait for them to have to ask. I would like to proactively go get those things, bring it to their table and say, hey, I recognize you were unable to access the system for the last week. What I did is I did a proactive reduction in your cost to accommodate for you not having to pay for that week as a company. And you'll see that on your next invoice. Whereas they have to come ask me for that stuff.
right.
Well, a salesperson's like, well, this doesn't really affect my sales, so I'm not going to get involved. I'm already working on the next thing. Whereas for me, I would get that phone call. I would work with our professional services team. I would make sure the communication's happening so the people that are actually working can focus on working and not sending feedback to and from, making the communication happen. So I want to keep everybody focused on what they're best at. So that's how I would deal with it.
Yeah, that's really powerful. There's a although very human, there's a system or a process there that you follow that I think is just you very eloquently encapsulated it all into the different stages of how to like proactively and reactively solve those issues as they come up. And I think that's really powerful to be able to acknowledge that. And then again, just to reiterate that point, coming from a place of not self, coming from a place of collaboration and working together to solve a problem that's external from the two individuals or multiple maybe individuals involved in that thing. So, um, listen, Dylan, this has been incredible. You've been very generous with your time and your wisdom, and I can't thank you enough for what you've shared so far. As we kind of come to a close with our time together, I wonder if we can shift gears and look a little bit forward at some of the work that you're doing. What are you aiming at? What are some of the big goals? What's on the horizon for you and for Fullcast?
Yeah, great question. So I spent the last, oh gosh, since 2016 in the Salesforce space.
Hmm.
And one thing I saw is unique that has happened is there's a whole new business unit sprouted out. We call it revenue operations now. It used to just be one person that was like in sales ops that was just trying to make things happen. They were very unpopular because they were asked to do so much and there was just not enough time in the day to make everybody happy. But that grew into an entire group of people. Now we're covering sales compensation, we're covering quota assignment, we're covering territory assignments and carve. And think about how big the companies are. And we tend to focus on 100 million plus. Um, when you say we're going to hire 3,000 sales reps next year, and you got to rewrite your entire book and all the accounts and how they're reassigned, most of that right now is being done on spreadsheets. It's being done in this module or that module. So these RevOps people are a little bit in HR software, a little bit in ERP software, a little bit in CRM, a little bit in forecasting tools, a little bit in lead routing tools. And then finally, whatever they can do there, they're in a spreadsheet. And so all that data is distributed across the business, nothing's centralized, which makes it very difficult to plan with that data on where you think you're going to be and create a forecast and a strategy for an entire fiscal year. So what Fullcast does is solves that entire problem in one core platform. So what Salesforce is to sales, what Workday is to HR, Fullcast is to RevOps. So we have an entire platform where you can do your headcount and capacity planning. You can do your lead routing logic and build that in one spot. You can do your territory and account planning, account assignments, territory creation, et cetera. And then you can also do your quota target setting right there. And then when it's all said and done, you can go up and push one button and push the entire plan into Salesforce with all the rules, all the logic, and all the process and all the data realignment. Right now, if you were to go build that whole plan, spend 4 months doing it, then you're going to hand it to your CRM team and you're going to say, now go write all this logic for us in Salesforce, which they'll do. And once it's pushed into Salesforce, you're going to get about 300 tickets from the field with all the exception handling, all the holdover accounts, this person's not even at this company anymore. How did you not catch this? And then you're going to spend the next 3 months fixing all of that. And then you're 6 months into your year and you don't even know where you are with your plan. So we solve all that in one core platform with reporting, dashboards, and it's native to Salesforce, so it can plug right in through a managed package. We plug into Workday as well. So it's basically a CIO's dream because we're taking all their core investments they already have and then fixing a problem that's distributed, where there's 15 different technologies. Someone somewhere is having to maintain, manage, and handle, and we're putting it in one core platform. But here's a really unique thing, and this goes back to what we were talking earlier about anticipating your customers' needs and providing for it. Most of these other platforms, you have to go buy managed services. You have to go get a partner to come in. Fullcast can get you live in less than 90 days. We do the implementation, so you're not transferring across multiple people. And then we'll give you a customer success manager that has fingers on keyboard skill set, and they'll stay with you as long as you have a contract with us. So when you're going through your planning, they'll be in your planning sessions with you, understanding how what's being decided will actually apply to the technology, and then they'll help you write it. That way, you don't have to re-platform. You don't have to worry about not having the internal skill set to adopt the technology, but that person can also swivel chair with you so that knowledge transfer can happen over time so that you become better and better at the tool. So in a nutshell, we're solving a multi-billion dollar problem, and why we're having the success we're having.
Yeah, that's incredibly exciting. I'm really looking forward to seeing how that's received and the growth that you guys are going to achieve as a result of the efforts there. What sort of challenges or friction do you think you're going to face along the way there?
Yeah, great question. Well, one of it is that when you think about groups of people like CFOs and CIOs, there's a lot of organization and even conferences built around those people.
Hmm.
It's very fragmented for RevOps. When you hear go to market, you typically think of like lead routing companies, you think of like SDRs and BDRs, but go to market also includes the plan of how you're going to actually go to market, what your strategies are going to be, how much pipeline you need, what kind of MQLs that means. So what does marketing have to deliver to sales so the sales can have enough opportunity to and their conversion rates to deliver the revenue that the CFO is going to care about.
Hmm.
That entire planning process typically happens in the busiest time of year in Q4, maybe late Q3, and try getting those people to focus when they're just trying to get the year completed, right?
Right.
So those are the biggest challenge is like, how do we get the people in RevOps be aware there is a tool like this? So for Fullcast, it's like getting the education out there. So podcasts like this help us do that.
Hmm.
Going to a lot of these conferences help us with that. But also maybe building that community into a place where they become helpful to each other, where they all kind of know each other and they understand what the tools are available to them, where their challenges are, and giving them a place to voice those concerns. So that's another thing we're building is community around the RevOps groups,
Hmm.
and bringing them in as friends, and then helping them give us the insights to make this platform everything it needs to be for them now and in the future.
Yeah, really powerful. That the whole education-based marketing and building the communities around the products and all of that stuff is very much in alignment with some of the, new trends and things that I'm seeing from all the other conversations I've had. You guys are on track there in your thinking.
Yeah,
Very,
got to
very
show up with
exciting.
value, right? Give them a reason to care about you. You've helped them with this, now they'll help you with that, right?
Yeah, yeah. The law of reciprocity, I think, is such a beautiful psychological and social hack.
It's just honest and genuine, and
Yeah,
it's the most authentic thing we do as people is care about each other.
right. Yeah, it's funny, man. One of my experiences with this was when I was volunteering for the Salvation Army with my girlfriend. We were doing the kettlebell where you jingle the bells and people donate. I was at a hockey game, so kind of doubling in the deal there. And when we first set up, they gave us a bucket of candy canes and told us, give these to people when they give you money. Okay, well that's fine. We sat there for the first half hour or so, and um, the feeling that you get from people who are literally working. Very hard at avoiding your eye contact is debilitating. It's very much it takes the wind out of your sails. And so I broke the rules. I grabbed the bucket of candy canes. I took a handful and I just went out into the crowd, started handing them out. And by the end of the night, our bucket was heavy enough that the lady that brought it in couldn't carry it out. I had to carry it out for her. So it was that shift. And hey, listen, I don't care if you're donating. I'm giving candy canes to kids and families and everybody else, and they're all having a good time, and we're laughing and smiling. And because of that, people became a little bit more generous. So I'm very much apprised to that idea of leading with value and giving where you can, and establishing that rapport and relationship. And so to see it actually in play, especially in big business, is such a refreshing thing. So I'm excited for the work that you're doing, Dylan. I think there's a ton of opportunity out there for you guys to capitalize on, and much success. As we
And
kind of
Devin,
close out
thank you for being the kind of person that would do something uncomfortable for your community. That's rare too. And for what you're doing with this podcast, you're giving value to a lot of people. And so I see that in what you're doing, and I respect it. And if I can ever help you with any of it, let me know.
Hey, I appreciate that vote of confidence. It goes a long way. If somebody wanted to reach out to you, Dylan, to pick your brain or perhaps work with you, what's the best way to do that?
So just find me on LinkedIn. It's just Dylan Ferguson, Ferguson, and you can find me on LinkedIn. Reach out there, and then I'm happy to get you my individual contact details. You can also find us on Fullcast.com. We have a web form there where you can fill it out if you like more. And say you found us on this podcast. We'd love to know that it came from here, so we can pump up Devin and his podcast. And yeah, we're happy to help engage, and understand that if you reach out, we get that we're going to educate first.
Hmm.
It's a coalition building exercise at a company for what we do. So don't feel like you're going to get a hard sell from us. We're just going to show you what it does, and it kind of does its own. And once you see it, you're like, oh wow, okay, it's not when you want it. It's like, can we get it?
Yeah, yeah. How hard do I have to work to get
Exactly.
it?
Yeah.
Awesome, Dylan. Thank you so much for joining me here. On that note, if we'll make sure we link everything in the show notes so anybody watching or listening will find you easily. And if you're watching and listening and want to reach out to me and my team for any reason as it relates to marketing or AI, you can visit nextgengrowth.com. Otherwise, that's it for this episode. Thanks for joining us for this incredible conversation, and I will see you in the next.